Hello? Sounds like my mic is working. Everybody looked up. Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything since it
That's
says
Jonathan.
this is Jonathan. That's right.
Yeah, we don't see your,
You have an ETA for Scott? Should we?
oh,
Oh, are we waiting for a quorum?
oh, yeah, we're waiting.
Yeah,
for
we
it
are,
now.
Jonathan.
I see. Is there any indication that we might not have one tonight?
Scott's on his way down.
Great. I leave it all to you.
Presentation. Yeah.
Since it's not there.
Yeah, let's do that. Do not require a quorum. Good evening, everybody. We have 4. Our quorum is 5. We believe our 5th member will be here imminently, but we will get started. Thanks for your attention and involvement this evening. Would you please call the roll?
Mercy Long. Stacy Coburn. Here. Walter Dinstead. Scott Hagee. Kristen Lilivick. Timothy McLaughlin.
He's present.
Dan Richardson.
Present.
Ben Ring.
Present.
Marcus Swift.
Councilman McLaughlin, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
And if you're able, remove your hat. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will skip over a couple of items until we have a quorum. But if Mr. Schechtel, if you're ready, would you give us your presentation, please? Item 6A for those keeping track.
Thanks for having us back and showing up. I was going to say, Tim Laughlin,
Yes,
we're the only 2 real white hairs in here.
I guess.
You know where mine came from?
Business.
So you should have in your board packet a budget, which is part of the completion packet, then a grant. Oh, sorry, it's not. Okay, we good? Did you hear that? In your packet, you should have a completion budget request and then the grant request on a second page. You do have some slides to show you on the screen. I'll just kind of go through them kind of quickly for the sake of the audience if you haven't seen them. These are historical photos of the work that we began in 2005 on the Mint building. You probably saw the first photo was an elevation. That was what the building would have looked like had it been completed. Our understanding of the architecture of the time that this is probably the most, the best representation of stonemasonry of that era. So it was 1864 to roughly 1869 during the completion of what was there. So if you just sliced off the floor above the door in the center, that's below that was, and the cellar level was all that was completed. So you saw the excavator down there. We put that into the cellar in 2005 and worked on it for about 5 months to get the cellar in better condition. So we'll reference some of those areas in the building, but if you want to flip through the slides, just kind of move right through them. We'll get just kind of an update from when we started in 2005. It's 20 years ago, 2 months ago. We've done, want to just keep move those forward. Thank you. There's the excavation that we did for about 3 months. That's what it looked like after we excavated. Another one, please. We began in earnest 2024. This is the city water main tap we're doing there. So we had to tap in for a fire suppression system, a 12-inch water main underneath of 2nd Street. Slide. A new pipe going to the building. Slide. That is the riser building and enclosure. This is a typical 1-day hole to bore. Took 1 day to set that up and bore through 36 inches of salt. Get the sewer line out of the building. So we added a new sewer line in the alley to a grease trap. Next slide. That's an example of boring overhead through the arches in the cellar to get the fire suppression system in. Slide. That's the finished borehole that you saw me boring at that location. Slide. It's a 250-gallon commercial grease trap, vent grease, oils and fats from going into this sewer system, into sanitation plant downtown. Next slide. It's a revised dock. There was a dock there for years, and we just basically dismantled it. It was pretty bad shape, and this is the new loading dock. Moved the gas lines so we could have full truck access. Slide. That's unfinished kitchen. Next slide. That's blacktop from the city crew putting the blacktop down in the alleyway. It was one of the last alleys downtown to receive blacktop. It'd be converted from that to gravel. Slide. That's what it looks like. Done. This is the outdoor patio, part of the patio that we replaced in the front because we had to dig in the lines. We put back new concrete. Part of the completion package includes 500 square feet just to one side and the other side of that new concrete. We're going to finish that the same way when we get to it. Next slide. This is some of the rooftop equipment that we installed with this large commercial exhaust hood. These rooftop fans. Slide. This is commercial hood. It's 15 feet long. It has a makeup air system. Slide. This is what we have to do to structurally rebuild the floors in there. The other concrete is from original construction. Make these floors usable, which are 14 inches thick. We're pouring about 2.5 inches of dry pack on top of that so we can create flat spots and places where we have to have drains. So it's arduous work. Next slide. This is how we set it up. Center of that star goes to a floor drain. That whole section there took about a week to do. 3 men. Next slide. This is what it looks like when it's done. This is a porcelain surface, basically a lifetime floor system. Next slide. This is a additional seating area that has been completed, and Freebridge be able to come in the open door that you see where the tarp is running. That will connect directly to the pub. It's about 300 square feet of new seating. Slide. Is that it? Oh, okay. That's it. Steve, you want to take over?
For the record, Steve Light, 1816 East 10th Street, the Dalles. I am the owner of Freebridge Brewing. Some of you probably on this board were present in March of 23 when we first came to the board with a package, an application that we were applying for the incentive program, which would have been, we were looking at the mixed use project potential. It was discovered that we, after defining what mixed use was, our project didn't quite fit that bill. So Josh and his staff decided that maybe this would be better suited if we went to the board directly for funding for this project. during that time, while we were putting together the presentation to go to the board directly with this request, it was discovered that we were going to be required to have a full code survey done on the building. After that code survey was completed, the intent, of course, was to determine the actual spaces that we would be occupying and how we were going to essentially pull all the permits for this very expansive upgrade to the Mint building. During that process, it was noted that because we are an F2 and adjacent to an A2 category business, that we were going to be required to have fire suppression in the building. That was a pretty significant setback for us. When we originally came to the board, we were looking at about $150,000 project-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. And of course, once we discovered that we were going to be, and the only way to comply to get the permitting was to install a fire suppression system, which Tim had noted, over $100,000 now was attached to this already fairly expansive budget, which that of course put us in a real predicament. We came back to the board, I believe it was in May of 23, with the idea that we also understood at the time that the urban renewal money would not support paying for a fire suppression system. But we also discovered at that same time that it was going to be placing into use areas that were not really utilized in the building. They were underutilized. This would actually allow us to move into these particular spaces. And that's, Tim showed you some of the kitchen area that we'd be moving into. That allowed us to qualify for taking advantage of that space. Unfortunately, shortly after the presentation that we had made to the board in, I believe it was May of 23, it was, we found out that there were going to be there was a freeze on the funding that was going to be coming out of urban renewal pending an audit, based on the funding that urban renewal may or may not have available moving forward. So with some direction from Dan Spots, EDO at the time, we started to kind of sharpen our pencils a little bit and look at, what potentially we could or couldn't do. Fact is that the fire suppression system had to be installed first and foremost before any additional permits could be pulled in the building. In order to expedite this so that it made sense for Freebridge to take advantage of this new space, we had to make some commitments right up front. Contracts were signed with general contractors. Fire suppression had to be, we had to engage with that company as well. All this time knowing that urban renewal does not reimburse for any work that had been completed prior to any type of funding that may or may not be available for us. The predicament that we were in was this project needed to kind of continue along. We've been waiting for this kitchen since 2018. Some of you probably are aware of that. We're finally had some momentum moving forward. It was imperative for the revenue for Freebridge that we move into this kitchen as soon as we possibly could. And here we are 2 years later, still not across the finish line on this project. We completely understand that a lot of that was out of the Urban Renewals Board's control, as far as the freeze on the funds was concerned. But in the essence of timing, the project had to kind of continue moving forward. And we felt confident when we left the board for the very final time before coming back today that the board was inclined to fund this project, maybe not in its entirety, but we felt that we were looking at a 50-50 match on the $50,000 incentive program was nearly guaranteed. And that based on the ROI from Freebridge Brewing, it would put us an additional maybe I think it was 102,000 or maybe it was 112,000, but the total package that the board was ready to approve was 162,000. But because we didn't have at the time a real accurate quote from the fire suppression system, it was determined that maybe this should be tabled for a little bit until we were able to come back with some real numbers, because we were getting numbers all over the board for the fire suppression system. Once we were able to identify what fire suppression system we were going to go with, unfortunately, we didn't have funding available, so there was almost no need to come back to the board to try to get some additional funding for this. So the project continued to move forward with the anticipation that we were hoping sooner than later that funding would be freed back up again. But of course, it took, I want to say, more than a year in time before it was determined that there was going to be some funds available for the incentive program. And that actually just came to fruition just a few months ago when the Urban Renewal Board was able to get the additional funding, the TIF money, until sunsetting in 2029. We definitely realized that we had to make some choices moving forward in order for this project to come to fruition in a time frame that made sense for Freebridge Brewing to take advantage of that revenue. Things had to move, but we knew that we checked all the boxes before we made that decision, anticipating that, understanding that the board has discretion. We understood that that Josh and his staff had made it clear that they were not going to support this, and it was because that Renewal does not reimburse for expenses, and we did make that choice going into this. We were just really counting on that the money would be available sooner than later, but the project continued to move forward, and money kept getting spent, and we're now at a point where we are approximately 90% through this project, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We just need to get this across the finish line. The benefits really for Freebridge Brewing is that we're going to have this expansive kitchen. I'll be hiring more people. The ROI is still very relevant to the project. We've already started to make plans for expanding the brew floor to accommodate for more revenue being generated through the pub, essentially buying more beer from the brewery. And with the kitchen expansion, we're going to be offering a new menu. That'll also be consistent with hiring more employees for the staff, both in the kitchen and the front of the house. But of course, we're still not quite there yet. And so we are asking the board to consider the fact that we have checked all the boxes. We've jumped through numerous hoops to get to this point, and that the ask that we have currently is we find to be very legitimate and very reasonable, and are hopeful that the board will take into consideration that feel like at no fault of the board, but we got knocked off track and got off the rails on this. And we're hoping that you would consider that in your decision to continue funding the project at the moment.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Tim. Question for Jake and Josh. We'll be considering this under action item 9C. Is that right? That's
Correct.
so in light of that, and in light of still waiting on our fifth person, I'm going to say thank you for the presentation. And we'll come back and board and others can ask questions at that point. All right. So please hang around for a few minutes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a second presentation with regard to the Craig's building is, I presume, either Ms. Fortin or Mr. Brown or Ms. Sipe. Excellent. Please come forward and tell us about your project.
Have a slide deck. Perfect. Thank you so much.
We'll introduce ourselves and get started.
Very good.
David Brown, owner of the building, is planning on joining us today too. I think we thought we might get started.
You're right on time. Come on in.
Just sat down and the first presentation finished a little early and they're going to wait for questions. We can-
Floor is yours. Yep.
Microphone.
Can you pull the mic up?
Microphone.
We're running on Zoom and the people on Zoom can't hear.
Oh, yeah, great, great. How's that? Is that good enough?
Jonathan, can you hear?
Zoom can hear you. Thank you.
All right. I bet.
Great, great. Thank you. My name's Dave Brown. I own the Craig Building here at Second and Federal. And we are happy to have the time with you to come in and talk about what our vision is for the property and also what we think the opportunity is here in the Dalles. A little bit about my background. I'm a native, grew up in Oregon, went to school at Oregon State, and got out of school, decades ago, and have been making my living in agricultural space. I own a firm that does energy efficiency and resource conservation in the agricultural irrigation space. And then here 20 plus years ago, the wine industry locally was so fascinating to me that we were able to start an import and distribution business out of Portland, where we buy from all over the world and then we turn around and resell to grocery stores and restaurants and those customers. But I also really had a fancy for vineyard property. We looked a lot down in the valley and really admire what's going on down there, and people doing vineyards that are really terrific. But I never could find anything that really I thought was compelling. And so we started looking elsewhere, and I looked up in Walla Walla and up on Red Mountain and, driving up the gorge to get up there. And so I have, had a relationship with the Dalles for decades. And so started wandering around in the hills out south of town and looking for potential vineyard property, and was able to find a 300-acre site up there. And we planted our first vines back in 2018. And my observation for you, I don't know exactly what the city's goals are and what the urban renewal group's goals are, but it feels to me as though the Dalles is really well positioned to be able to capitalize on wine tourism. To create a vibrant downtown core. You look at the other towns, go look at what Minville was 20 years ago, or Carlton, or Newburgh, or in California, Napa, Sonoma. And I don't know what the community's desire is for all of that, but having a consistent source of tourism, whether it be for recreation or purposeful like wine tourism, and enables the central city to be more vibrant, right? You can afford the shops and the amenities, and it ends up creating the tax base that the city's after. And so that all seems like a favorable, and that's the reason that we bought the Craig building, right? We've got the vineyard up on 3 Mile, and we see the opportunity to be able to create a gathering space. I don't know if you know, like Red Hills Market in Dundee or Oakville Grocery down in Napa, but wine country all has some kind of a jumping off point, right? A collecting ground. And we think that something could be created there at the Craig building that would be very unique, and it would draw people in. And then there's all this beautiful winery properties that are here. And with also the Dalles Irrigation District, you guys know all this, you got 4,000 irrigated acres. that the tree fruit thing is dicey. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. And so it wouldn't surprise me if there's not additional vineyards planted. And we've found that the climate and the law is really special for growing grapes. So long story short, I think there's a terrific opportunity in the Dalles for wine-centric tourism. And we want to participate in that. And we also want to line up our efforts with what your goals are, right? So part of what we want to do is better understand what the city's objectives are and the urban renewal's objectives are, and be able to see if there's a connection there with us, if that's something I'd like to do. The two people here at the table, I don't know if you guys introduce yourself, but these are two architects, Ellen Fortin and Jim, that I've worked with for decades. We bought another historic property in Portland 40 years ago and invested into that. And it turned out to be a real, I think, springboard of the area of the Central East Side. And a lot of investment flowed in there. You know, if you can get a few properties that are invested into and get some traction and get some momentum going, then it will aggregate. Additional good things potentially can happen. So what makes Shim and Ellen, I think, so unique is one, really great educational backgrounds and experiential backgrounds and skill sets, but they have a very solid sense of design. And I'm really drawn to that. I think there's a lot of design in the world. There's a lot of art, architecture, and food and wine and everything. And there's really only probably 10% of it that's really super good. And there's a lot of it that it's not. And Ellen and Shim are both really capable design architects. And the other thing is they can execute on stuff, right? We get locked onto a project and they can make it happen. They can get the drawings and get through the city and manage the contractors and get stuff done and are super organized. And I'm, you know, in my business, you got to be organized, got to be efficient, got to have your act together, be able to get anything done. And so I'm really drawn to people that can get in and close the loop, right? And so, you know, if we decide to move forward with something, Craig Building, and we partner, co-invest with the city or the urban renewal, and you know that we can finish the project. I really would like them to be able to share. They've got a great vision for what can happen here, and so I want them to be able to share on some slides. And let me kick it to Ellen. But you guys, any questions you have, feel free to stop us at any point if you're interested. We're happy to field questions, and again, thank you for the time to be able to share our thoughts about building in the Dalles. Thanks.
We'll keep it moving. Thank you, David, so much for your kind words. I'm Ellen Fortin, and as David said, I'm an architect. I've worked with David for. We have a long, pretty productive history in and around Portland. So as David said, I just want to tell you about like my introduction to the Dalles. As a point of history is just moving up the gorge. I moved here 30 years ago. I have two Oregonian sons. I have a pretty good tap root here now. And, you know, we enjoy this place because we started coming up to 3 Mile Winery and worked on David's project. The Dalles quickly became just like a de facto nexus for us to stop, collect ourselves, do a little shopping, run around. Kind of fell in love with it. So now I take my family up here. We hike, shop, teaching. We look at the murals. I'm a fan. I'm a booster. So it's kind of delightful that we're starting to think about this. Honest, and the vision for things, he makes it look easy, but it's hard. these things happen. We help them as best we can. So as we started this project, I just want to say, you know, as we saw the project before, anybody that starts, you know, full building renovation, any daunting task in this climate, it's not easy. We're not dreamers. We realize that you just really have to bear down and get it done. The economic factors such as just the draw of the city and region. It's not Hood River now. Will it be? No, it's a dream. We may not want it to be that. We may want it to be something entirely different. We're very aware of that. So these future leasing rates, rent rates, granting partners, all these things are things that is how we'll calibrate and manage our investments. We expect that the urban renewal group is just the same, that how you're making a worry about what you want to use. So we are just really excited to introduce you to the way we're thinking about the project, tell you about ourselves, the starting point. So, you know, there just seems to be, we were talking about it the other day, there's a field of dreams kind of approach where build it and keep. That's not really us. We kind of are a little bit more calculated. We tend to look at the process as a long-term commitment. It takes a long time for us to, but when we do, we're like dog with a bone. So I think we look at this as a way to work on it slowly, to evaluate as we go. And we believe that our DNA, really a results-driven team, that's what we get off on, is building things, making a change in a place. My background for a long time in Boston, a lot of urban renewal and community development. So I had a lot to do with those kind of. We would like to talk you through just what our full vision is of the building and then the incremental steps that we should happen. We believe that this is the best of take on.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you please speak into the microphone? It's impossible to hear
A little
online.
closer. So
Yes, please.
we're looking at more of an incremental approach where we take individual projects, be it the facade, the internal infrastructure, attracting tenants to come in and be a restaurant or a cafe, and looking at these discreetly so that we can incrementally move that to be an occupied space, a contributing factor to both Second Street and the Federal Plaza. So that's kind of the goal. So we will begin to walk you through our project. Look at the next slide, please. This is something that people maybe can look on the website and go through, but this was just kind of highlights of the three businesses that David was speaking about. Mitchell Lewis Staver, that's in 1882. That's some roots. And that's the agricultural business. And then Mitchell Wine Group is the warehouse that we put together in Southeast Portland, and he's a distributor of fine wines there. And that's this actual team developed that warehouse, and now it's a place where they actively sell out of the space, and we have wine and food events. So we're kind of really linking to the businesses, the processes that David's already put in place to kind of make this a nexus for the next space. Then the 3 Mile Vineyard, which is a gorgeous vineyard. Look on their website if you want to just get a wonderful little piece of history about Oregon and about the Dalles and the high desert. And we really want to encourage that connection, but not only David's businesses, but wine growers in general, Wine Grower Association, very many people that are involved with this tangentially. So those are our goals, and that's kind of what we bring to the table as we start. Next slide. Shem is going to tell you a little bit about the history, past and present of the building.
Thank you, Ellen. And just to introduce myself, I'm Shem Harding with Decca Architecture. I've been practicing architecture for 25 years, specializing in historic renovation, adaptive reuse projects. You may know a couple of our projects. I'll mention them. We helped David Banco move the Neon Museum into the old Elks Lodge. So that was something we did 4 or 5 years ago. Be longer than that. But lots of code challenges, a tricky building to deal with. Another one you may know is the Wacoma Hotel renovation in Hood River. I think they've rebranded it as the Lightwell Hotel. That's opening soon. That was another one of our projects, renovating, bringing that building back from a state of disrepair. And so we have a lot of experience digging into these historic buildings and bringing them back, overcoming a lot of technical challenges. We're really excited about the Craig building because this is a building with a lot of great character. I think the building was built in 1890, severely damaged in the fire of 1891, rebuilt. There's been a lot of changes over time. I think 1910, it was rebuilt as the Edward C. Pease and Company Market, kind of a retail presence. But it's got some really nice features. It's got some nice classical revival detailing up in the cornice. The exterior has been taken care of and really nicely. A lot of the features are in great shape. It's got these really big, beautiful Chicago style windows. Some of the stuff on the ground level, there's been some more modern remodels that maybe aren't quite in character, but we're really hoping to bring some of that back with some of the work that we're doing on the building. So what we've been doing is really, since David has bought the building, we've been digging in, created some as-built drawings of the building. We've gone through and measured everything, done some selective demolition work to dig into the walls and the floors and really discover how the structure is working, what the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems are like. The building's mostly vacant right now. It does have a tenant in the ground floor, which is Adams Design Center, which is a great design build construction company. But really starting to look at what this building can be and what the challenges are. It's been preserved in really great shape, except that, again, that ground floor remodel from the 50s or 60s, a little bit out of character. And so we've got some ideas about how to bring that ground floor back to something more in keeping with the historic character.
Perfect. That's a great segue. I won't go into too much detail, but I thought I'd just take note as you're looking at this, the difference between the two upper slides and the one on the right in particular. The storefront is really enlarged and very much more welcoming as a retail element. It's a much higher glazed window condition. And you can see when they put the awning on at Gordon's and then later that you feel a little compression, not quite as welcoming. You do get some coverage on the streetscape. And then also with the mural on the side of the building that doesn't really allow for any entry on Federal. So in these ways, I would just want to say there are many iterations of the past of the Craig building. It's not like one historic, beautiful building that's been now modernized. It's like 3 different versions. And even on the one on the upper left, that's the Chicago style windows and the way it is now, where they basically took 18th century windows that were very slight, very little light in the upper floors, and just expanded that to be almost a full bay. And it's pretty glorious once you get inside, and we will look inside eventually. I'll take the next slide, please. So these are just, we gather things all the time and we call them precedents. They're inspiration. We're trying to get to know this type of building. What does it mean? What else is in and around the Dalles that's meaningful to us? And it doesn't take very far. I just had to wander into the saloon exactly, but to find some really great examples of them opening up above the entry doors to these clear stories that penetrate and open light back into the building. And in that one building on the lower right, it has a recess off the street too, because your sidewalk is actually quite narrow. It's only about 6 feet. Anytime you get that depth on this sidewalk where people can inhabit it and activate it, you're going to get more activity along 2nd Street. And the beautiful character of the ironworks and even I don't know what you guys call it, but I call it the Whirlpool building, where you can see that there were those clear stories above that someone's painted out, and then they put a steel canopy that still gives an airy kind of quality, but shields the street. So just looking at that, I think it's just really good to look at those precedents. Some are more expensive than others, so we have to keep ourselves in line a little bit. Next slide, please. So here's our beginning. So as Shem said, we've done a full, dossier of existing condition drawings. So these are elevations, the flat elevation of 2nd Street there. At the top is the existing with the canopy. And the 2 on the middle and bottom kind of just indicate what would it be like to open up to the street a little bit more, get more glazing, get a canopy that's just kind of a little bit reveals the beauty of the building more. Next slide. And this is a rendering that we've started to play with to give everyone a sense of kind of where we're going with it. More that depth that we have on the building that was actually a modern intervention is actually a really great part of that building and allows you to occupy it and not be in the way of walking down Second Street. The other thing you have, I'm sure you have kind of standards in the city that you're starting to develop, or someone did at some point, of like, there's lights along the street, there are trees along the street, there are all these rhythms of normal life that create a great downtown. It's like step by step. That, of course, it takes money, but it takes commitment and a vision of it too. And I think you've got a lot of that already going. We think it's one of the prettiest, like, old 18th, 19th century, 20th century towns in Oregon for sure, and hasn't been completely remade. So there's an opportunity to just say what's really working and what can we build on. So that's kind of what we're interested in doing. Next slide. So then going over to the other side of Federal Street Plaza, just even seeing the roots of it before we do anything. It's just a really great space. We've got some mature trees at the back. The little transportation building is not much is done with it now, but it's kind of a jewel. It'd be really beautiful. It's a nice little building. And then you see our building on the right there that is pretty formidable. And I think it could be a great possible connection to the new Federal Plaza that you're already investing in and developing, which is great. The other thing I wanted to say was we have the mural that I've kind of followed the mural people. And, some I know can be troubling to people. I think this is a particularly great one. We don't necessarily want it blocking our facade, but we are toying with the idea of how we could use it elsewhere. Could it be inside the building? Could it be a backdrop to a bar or a cafe or something like that? So we don't want to lose the character. We're not like trying to paint this with a new brush. We really want to go, what is essentially the Dalles, and how do we become enmeshed in that and not just lose it? Next slide. So on this side, same kind of issue. You can see on the upper one is the existing conditions with the mural. And then on the second and third, where we're opening that up. This is an example, I just like to show like precedents that I know well, that I'm always have my camera or my phone now, just looking for what really makes a great street plaza. It's relatively small. What do people want? Usually it's about shade. It's about tree coverage and comfortable seating and access to adjacent activity. So we have a great opportunity here with Tony's site and the Craig building to kind of be the walls of an outdoor room, a living room. And with that comes these zones where we can populate with a little dining along each edge from the brewery or from our place. And what that does is just gives you activity. It gives you day-night activity. All those things are going to really start to matter. Plaza, I think, is just a brilliant idea. I think we're very fortunate that it's right next to our building, but we are going to milk that for all it's worth. And we hope that we value and contribute to it. Excellent. So this was the plan done by Walker Macy that you guys had been working with. And I don't really know the state of where you are right now with it. I know it's under a little bit of a review. And we've given a few comments. I think you'll see in this diagram with our hand-drawn elements that we just want to see that the two buildings that are directly adjacent to it have an opportunity to spill out onto the plaza rather than have something built against our building. There's been kind of some terrace seating and some things that, might seem nice if it was just a blank wall, but I think the opportunity to activate and have it be more translucent and the connection from inside to outside is going to be really impactful. And again, I love that transportation building. And I think it's just such a great opportunity. We've just been kicking around like, what could it be? Could it be, a place where that's, you ride your bike from the bike path and you go there and you get a map of the Dalles and every brewery or wine place or great, your new organic grocery store, et cetera. Or I'm telling you, if it was an ice cream shop, everyone would be there. And I think, and everyone would be on our plaza and everyone would be in the building, which we like. So anyway, these are just things that I think when you can make a beautiful design, but it's really about the shade, the comfort, and the activation. That's really what you need to have it work. More slide. So this is the view looking into that that plaza. And again, we're not trying to design it. We want to aid in the help and we want to be a contributor. But again, you just see that axially to not activate that transportation building is kind of a sin. Next slide. This is the other view looking towards Second Street, and you kind of get we don't even have it on a terribly populated day, but just the idea that people would be spilling out, that you'd be watchful, you might be eating while your kids are playing on the blocks, or there's a water feature or whatever it is. And then this idea of festival lights, these things that just make an atmospheric kind of space where you might really want to hang out in a hot summer night for a moment. Next slide, please. Shem is going to take you inside and show you what's going on there.
Thanks, El. So as I mentioned, we've been doing a lot of work in evaluation of this building. We've had a structural engineer walk through the building and assess the structure, provide a report. There actually has been some strengthening done over the years, which is nice. We've had a mechanical engineer walk through the building, evaluate all the building systems. It's a little bit of a mixed bag, but the building does have fire sprinklers, which is great. It's got some relatively new infrastructure too, some water, electrical, things like that. We've got an environmental report done. So we've done some really serious work in understanding what the nature of this building is and what's needed. It has a fairly new roof and the exterior is in great shape. So somebody, has done a lot of work to preserve this asset and we want to take advantage of that. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about some of the uses that we're thinking about for this building. So the ground floor, David mentioned Red Hills Market. We're really imagining kind of a market cafe, something that would bring people in, provide food, provide a place together, and really serve as that gateway, that introduction, that jumping off point to wine country. We see a lot of value in having a strategic mix of uses throughout the day. So eventually, hopefully we get to a restaurant and some more evening oriented activity. But really see this as hopefully a great spot to meet up and grab supplies before you head out and visit the wine country. And hopefully we can create a lot of outdoor seating area, outdoor activity too, to really communicate people going by what kind of what's the opportunities that are in this building, draw people in. Next slide. Second floor is a little bit more interesting. I think we're envisioning residential uses up there, potentially up to 3 apartments. And also some meeting space, some gathering space that could support some events. And, it could be just wine distribution, education events. It could be places for people to meet, like Columbia Gorge Growers Association. So just providing some good community space up there that could maybe host some community meetings would be really nice. And I think we could see visiting winemakers or people who are visiting the vineyard staying up here. Maybe there's, guests from all over for accessing wine country. Next slide. So we just prepared a series of slides showing how these events and activities and uses might develop over time. So we're kind of showing this in 3 phases. In the near term, we really want to activate that ground floor. So we'd like to bring in some pop-up retail, maybe host some events in that large ground floor space. We might do a little bit of storage and distribution there, but really take advantage of being close to that plaza when the plaza's done to kind of bring people into our building from that urban room. Next slide. So in the midterm, we talk a lot about this market concept. So developing a market retail space with cafe seating, maybe a deli, but a place to grab supplies, and really kind of a mustering point for accessing the vineyard. So maybe this can be a meeting point for wine country tours, kind of a hub of wine-based activity. And it would be really great to start getting some residential use upstairs, be able to host some visitors or, have somebody living there and having that 24/7 activity and potentially having some meeting space. And if you flip to the next slide, this is really what we'd envision for the building fully built out as a fully occupied upper floor with apartments, great places to stay, great meeting areas for community events. Maybe we're able to host some larger events like conferences or, wine-oriented gatherings, and really ideally having a great restaurant downstairs, full bar, still having that market element, a full commercial kitchen that could just support a wide range of activity. So we see this building being just a great hub that can support the wine community, but also support the plaza and just become a really exciting place to be and start to, like Ellen was saying, build it and they will come, start to draw visitors and people to the area. Next slide. We've started to rough out a plan for how we might make these improvements over time. We're definitely moving incrementally in phases, but I think the near-term goals would be to address the exterior of the building, really put a new face on that building, make it really visible that something's happening here, spruce up that Second Street facade, hopefully open up that Federal Plaza facade, first couple projects, and then get into upgrading the infrastructure of the building, the core and shell, and putting in the systems and the improvements that we need to attract a really great vendor or tenant to run the market or cafe. Ultimately, in the long term, mid to long term, building out those apartments, building out that residential use on the upper floor. And really, as we build activity in the building, I think it will become more and more attractive, hopefully for a really compelling restaurant tenant, and just getting to that having the building entirely full and occupied. So this is sort of what we're thinking over the long term. And you can see there in the funding column, we're also thinking about how we might fund these projects. I think there's some really good grant opportunities, especially for some of the exterior work. Certainly looking at the Oregon Heritage grants, and we've gotten those on projects before. Like Diamonds in the Rough is a great grant. I think would be good for this. It's a grant that's specifically for taking facades that have been altered in an incompatible way and bringing them back to a more compatible condition. So we're starting to think about some sources of funding. And certainly it's great to have a conversation with this group and hopefully starting to think about how urban renewal may be able to support the project. But really, we have a long-term vision for this building and a certain direction. And, really excited about what this building could be and what it can contribute to the community and to the plaza. And I'll pass it off to Ellen to wrap things up.
David may want to say something too, but I wanted to also just thank you for giving us the time. I know this is really top level in some way, but we are burrowing into this project pretty quickly. And I know Emily Sipe, who's been talking with a lot of you, you've been so helpful in just answering our questions and preparing us to understand what the various grants are and what's applicable for this. We're going to follow the rules. She is dug in deeply, and we want to just, ferret out what is the best case scenario for us and how we can move forward with your support so that we can build a successful project and begin this process. So thank you for your time.
Any questions from the board?
Oh, but I see a lot of wonderful vision here. And if we can just make it all work and come up with a plan and work together, I think this could really be something special for the Dalles. All of that downtown corridor, talking about vertical housing for occupancy. We're talking about a living space for our citizens. I've always had this vision of maybe bringing back a promenade in the old days when people would dress up and go to a community center and leave the cell phones behind, take your kids, just walk and talk. That's the kind of city I like to see. It has that feeling already. We've just kind of lost our way a little bit, just kind of redefining it and making it. It's in the rough. You talked about it, just diamond in the rough, and you're right.
Anyone else?
My comment.
Ben or Stacy?
I'm excited to see anybody that wants to do upstairs residential downtown. That's I think, a very important thing to the vitality of downtown. And that's definitely on the top of the list for city council as well, with housing development and whatnot. Yeah.
See, there are 3 members of the city council sitting right here. So, and the only thing addition would be parking. And it's not that it's a problem in the Dalles, but it's overnight residential parking that's safe and secure.
Right.
And that's the key for that, for living downtown.
I just want to say thank you so much. You all did a fantastic job of providing very clear and concise information. I know it's a high level overview of what you're thinking, but I think you did a great job of sharing kind of where you're headed, and we could really see the vision, and I certainly appreciate that. And I was just thinking to myself the other day, I'm surprised that somebody hasn't realized that that building is sitting on the corner of what could be something really fantastic. So I'm excited that somebody's realized that.
That's the guy. He's the one with the
That's
vision.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Any ideas or guesstimates on, job opportunities? I mean, I know we're talking, 26, 27, 28, but any estimate on what you might think might be employees in those kind of timelines?
Mike, though.
If the project was fully built out, there'd be a need for a lot of employees to keep that going. The market, restaurant,
Right.
apartments, lodging, conference room. I could see 30 people working out of that facility. That wouldn't surprise me. We've looked at others and done head counts to see kind of what that is so that we occupancy codes and understand that, but that wouldn't surprise me.
Sure.
30 people.
Yeah. Jobs are always important, so that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's an event component too, that
Right.
could be temporary occupation.
Right.
I mean, we've even thought, because we didn't want to just build everything and wait for that, not because we're giddy. We just want to begin to test things like a scientist almost. Does this work? No, it doesn't. Let's try something else. So we were thinking, I mean, if we get a temporary permit, David could invite 30 wine growers to be in that building, and we could have, anyway, I won't get into all the things we kind of brainstormed about, but just temporary occupation in those first couple of years could just be really an interesting thing to see. And it's kind of the beginning of just a vision of activity. And then 30, 60 people flood the streets to look for a burger or whatever, so it comes slow, but it's that incremental, just like I was introduced to it randomly. And then kind of like, you gotta go to the Dalles, it really is interesting how it happens. It's a kind of snowballing effect.
Thank you.
I want to take a tour of the Port of the Dalles though.
Anytime.
That road, and I was just kind of seeing what's going on down there, and so much busy building and activity. So
Anytime. We can make that connection for you.
Anybody does have any follow-up questions, not even tonight, but if downstream, if you think of anything, you've got our contact info, and we'd be happy to engage and field any questions or any input that you have. We would welcome. So thank you.
I also went into your webpage and you're legitimate.
I'm gonna ask, sorry, Counselor, is there anyone in the public that has any questions? Since you all are here. No, very good. Thank you guys for being here this evening. If you have not started a pretty close conversation with the staff, I would say that would be a good next step.
If I may, Chair, before they leave.
Yep.
I would just like to say, this is Jacob Anderson, the new Economic Development Officer. These guys pulled together this presentation in very short order, and they put a lot of thought into it and a lot of time into it.
Really?
What we're looking at on the screen right now is kind of that plan. Something that would likely help them from your guys' perspective is what matters more to you? Is it the second floor and activating residential, or is it completing that first floor and getting the deli or something else that's permanent in there up and running sooner rather than later to help activate the Federal Street Plaza? Any advice that you could have for them on what the board is leaning towards, what matters more, would probably help them as they start to refine this.
Well, let's give some immediate I was going to say knee jerk. How about immediate initial thoughts? But I would ask Jake that you send it out. You guys send that question out to the rest of the board. We're thin on the ground tonight, but we do have generally speaking, a very active and thoughtful board. And that would be, I think, a useful channel of feedback. But since we're here, Tim, do you have any preferences for or priority areas that you think urban renewal would be?
We ponder this, yeah,
Yeah.
because there's huge potential here.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's contact information.
Does anybody want a hard copy of the deck?
Well, sure. I would take one if you have
Get
it.
digitally.
I will be sending it out to everyone digitally.
Okay.
For certain.
That would be great.
I'll take one. Yes, I'd like.
Do you have any initial feedback or preferences, Ben?
Yeah, I think it's going to be important to keep in touch with the federal plaza committee moving forward, definitely. And I think that having been on that committee, I think it's one of the questions that we had was, you know, what do we do with that side of the plaza? And I think we've had some good discussion around that, but I think that would be another good area to collaborate with, so that it's not it doesn't, one, it doesn't cost the taxpayers more money to modify something moving forward, and secondly, so that it provides a little bit of the canvas for you guys to bring in
You think
retail and all that.
Tony's building, or you? Yeah.
Both,
Yeah.
but the Craig's building being, in existence now, and making sure that that's prepped and ripe for.
We want to support your
Really
efforts in that
good
building.
Conversation with Matt a couple of weeks ago about trying to get Tony's and Craig's and the plaza all kind of under one umbrella so that it's cohesive, and they, our decisions are made collaboratively, so you don't end up with a kaleidoscope of things. And we gave him some good input, I think, on the plaza too.
Awesome.
I really appreciate the direction that you guys are taking there. I think doing that will be a signature long term. So anything that we can do to help, we want to do that.
Any wrap up thoughts, Stacy?
No, I was just gonna, similarly, I think of any thoughts I would have would be, timing based on, aligning that with what's happening with the plaza, and wanting to make sure, like you said, that things are done one time and done correctly.
Yeah.
As best as, least expensively as possible.
I would say, we've had a few conversations, but there is, a team that's just doing the plaza, and we really, and for understandable reasons, we haven't been a part of that. And really, when you're doing it, as I said, both Tony's and ours, we have a stake in the game, and we will contribute to it greatly if we're involved in any way that we can, but someone else. So we need that to come together a little bit.
One final thought, Mr. Chair. If the Tony's project, or up on the, was it an old car lot? And it's the Assault
Commons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there is any of those areas that are still in play, doing a custom crush wine facility in town. If you look at the Carlton Winemakers Studio in Carlton, really interesting concept, and it brings in a lot of unique winemakers, and it brings a lot of traffic. And the other thing to note, the wine tourism people have money. There's been studies on that, and they bring money into the community and they spend money. And so if you're looking for, if you have a vote and what the application of some of these properties, I would suggest to you to consider a custom crush facility.
Interesting. Thank you for pulling this together, apparently on pretty short order, and sharing your vision with us. It's very exciting, and just speaking for myself, I hope there's ways that we can work in concert in the coming year or two. Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, most of this analysis. Oh, yeah. Thank you, sir.
Any ETA on
We do
number
not
5?
On Commissioner Heggie, we do have Darcy is willing to call in right now, so we can move through the agenda.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on any urban renewal subject? 5 minutes are allowed per person. If so, please come up and use the microphone.
We do have Darcy with us.
Very good. Thank you for being here tonight, Darcy. We now have a quorum, so we will pop back up to item 4 and move through our agenda. Item 4 is an approval of the agenda as amended. Is there a motion from the board to approve the agenda?
I'll move approval of the agenda as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor, aye, or
Aye.
raise your hand.
Aye.
Approved with unanimity. Item 5 is approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, or changes wished? And if not, I would entertain and seek a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the March 18th, 2025 meeting.
Laughlin will second.
All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Very good. Motion passes. Our minutes are approved. We've had 2 excellent presentations, opportunity for public comment, and now we shall move to item 8. Commissioner Hagee joins us now and this is item 8A on our agenda. It's a public hearing to provide testimony on the adoption of the approved budget for our Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency for the 25-26 fiscal year. Now is the time scheduled for a public hearing for the agency board to receive public testimony considering the adoption of the approved budget for Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency's 2025-2026 fiscal year. Public hearings are required by Oregon law. Certain rules apply. First, a staff report will be presented. Next, I will ask the board if it has any questions for staff. After that, I will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Any person may testify in support of or opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the approved budget's adoption. Anyone offering in-person testimony must wait to be recognized, then approach the microphone and provide their name and address, and then testify. Anyone offering virtual testimony must raise their hand on Zoom, wait to be recognized by the chair, provide their name and address, and then testify. After all interested persons are afforded an opportunity to testify, I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. Finally, the board will then deliberate if needed, and the chair will accept a motion or multiple motions. These are the rules. Are there any questions? Okay. The public hearing on the approved budget for the 2025-2026 fiscal year is now open. May we please have the staff report?
Yeah, good evening, commissioners. Joshua Chandler, Community Development Director. On April 16th, 2025, the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee reviewed the proposed 25-26 budget. and voted to recommend it to you, the board. This is now being heard at our meeting here on May 20th. And we'll consider a resolution to adopt this budget this evening. At this time, staff does not have any recommended changes. The numbers are the same that we discussed previously at the April 16th meeting. If the board determines that any changes are necessary, there is a process to go through, but as mentioned, staff is not recommending any of those changes this evening. With that, relatively short and sweet, I would recommend staff's recommendation. Move to adopt resolution number 25-002, which is adopting the fiscal year 25-26 budget for the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency, making allocations and certifying a request for maximum tax revenue to the county assessor. That can answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you. Does the board have any questions for the staff with regard to the proposed and approved budget? Any questions? Seeing none, I will now open and ask if there's anyone from the public in person who wishes to testify in support of, opposition to, or in any other way directly related to the approved budget. Second call for live testimony. How about anybody online, anybody on Zoom? Is there anyone who wishes to testify in any way directly related to the budget? I'm seeing none. None? Very good. Last call. Seeing none, the public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Does the board feel it has enough information to make a decision? I'm seeing a nodding. Very good. I know that I do. We have been through the budget. I believe we are ready for action. I will entertain a motion if anyone has interest in making one. I have motion language if that would be helpful.
Just read this one, right?
Okay, is this to move to adopt resolution number 25-002?
Yes, sir.
Adopting the fiscal year 2025 to 2026 budget for the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency, making allocations and certifying a request for maximum tax revenue to the county assessor.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We're now moving on to our action items. Action item A, resolution 25-002 has been met, I believe. Action B, resolution 25-003, a resolution amending our incentive program guidelines. Is there staff report or staff comments?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Richardson, members of the board. Again, my name is Jacob Anderson. I'm the new Economic Development Officer. What you have before you is the update to the guidelines that has been discussed over multiple meetings. And there was a little bit of confusion in the transcript and the notes. And looking back at previous updates to the guidelines, those were done via a resolution. And at the last meeting, you kind of came to consensus, but having not been there and reading through it and having discussion with legal counsel, it was thought that it was best to bring these before you so that it's very clear and there's no questions. I also, having reviewed the history and the issues, we made updates to the incentive program that had been discussed. We also included a a few other things that hadn't been discussed that I want to speak with you this evening about and be very clear. You have the summary of key changes in the packet. One thing that has been discussed is part of the DFA process and what that looks like. Having reviewed it and looked at it, the DFA is clearly separate from the incentive program. It's more of one-off. And what my goal would be is to bring back to you in a future meeting a set of guidelines and policies that deal with the development funding agreements that might help put some sideboards on future DFAs. You also have there was a lot of discussion on the ROI and where that kicks in and how to do that. And there really wasn't a clear consensus coming out of that. And so what I did is I put in there for projects over $100,000, they must include a public benefit statement. And that, I think, finds a happy middle ground for the ROI analysis that we would then be asking the projects that meet that requirement, that they have to make a good case because it will be coming before the board. And then you would have the information you need to ask the tough questions when they do present to you on those cases. And one other thing that I added and took some liberty on is a conflict of interest. This was the first guideline and program that I had seen that didn't have any sort of conflict of interest requirements. And so I included that in, and it's a minor detail, but I think it's also very important for transparency purposes. Everything else, I believe, that has been included and added was very clear from the record what you had put forth. And I just wanted to make sure that if there's any questions on that moving forward, I was trying to take from multiple transcripts over multiple meetings. And so I want to make sure that the board has had the chance to review it and has any questions of staff, I'd be happy to answer.
Good, thank you. EDO Anderson. Are there questions from anyone on the board with regard to our incentive program guidelines, which we have mostly reviewed and approved, but we want to tighten up into a sort of watertight process here? Any questions? Any questions from here, board members present or on the phone? Does Darcy have any questions?
Darcy is dropped.
Darcy is dropped. Very good. All right. I just have one, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I did see our recently former EDO, Dan Spots, online, and I'm curious if you felt that you had some opportunity to review, as you said, a pretty involved record with regard to the guidelines. Did you and he get an opportunity to chat about this?
We have spent weeks chatting about it, and we all know that he is a workaholic, and even though he's retired, he's still online and available, and he just doesn't quit. And I've been really fortunate, and I can't say enough thanks in the amount of time that he stayed to help make a smooth transition for the good of the business of the board.
Very good. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public, either present in person or online, named Dan Spots or any otherwise?
Hey, I'm public now, Dan Spots, and I can say that I am delighted to have Jacob Anderson on board. He is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you.
Didn't have to pay him to say that.
That's very good. Well, we have gone through our guidelines, as you know, a number of times. I feel pretty comfortable with them myself. I don't have any questions. And unless somebody else has come up with something, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt URA resolution number 25-003, a resolution amending the Urban Renewal Incentive Program guidelines effective May 21st, 2025 as presented.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, I would ask that all in favor of the motion say aye or raise their hands.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
If I may, Chair,
You-
the plan from
yes.
here is we will be getting out the notice of funding. We'll be updating the website with this increase to $300,000. I think we will see multiple applications rolling in at a quick pace, and you will see a big change in downtown in a hurry based on the interest that I've heard so far. So thank you for your time and attention, and hopefully we'll be very busy here shortly.
Well, that's exciting. We know that costs to our historic buildings can be rather high, and hopefully these guidelines are actionable and substantial enough that we get some assistance to folks who are willing to invest in our downtown. Action item C, Mr. Schechtel and Mr. Light. You may come back if you wish. This is incentive program grant request for the Mint Building redevelopment phase 2. We've heard the presentation this evening from you. Thanks for sharing that, gentlemen. Are there comments, a report, or any other notes from staff before we deliberate on the request?
Yes, thank you, Chair and Council. As I delved into the history, this got even more convoluted and the multiple meetings and the direction that it was going at one point. The board has in the past invested in the Mint building with $50,000. So there has been an application. You'll see that the application that's submitted has an ask for $300,000 on the application. I did have a meeting with Tim, and he provided an updated pro forma that is included in the packet that shows that even though the applicant is asking for 300,000, he recognizes the 50 and is willing to limit that to $250,000. This is about as difficult as I could imagine for a situation in a staff report, and more importantly, a decision for the board, being that there's been so much back and forth over the course of time. On top of that, it is a project that is currently in process. They are working and building on it every day, and every day in which they don't have an agreement in place is money that, according to the rules, they can't get any reimbursement on. So some of the considerations that staff has had to look at is the timing of the work. The application indicates a significant portion of the applicant's funding requests for reimbursement or cost for the work are already underway. And some of that has likely already been completed. Our current guidelines and the guidelines that we adopted just recently indicate the costs for the projects that have already been started or been completed prior to grant award are ineligible for project program funding. And that is very clear in the agreement that they have already entered into for the first $50,000. That was included in the agreement. So the applicant's well aware of that and has mentioned that earlier today. We can, I think, post my conversations with Mr. Schechtel, it would not exceed the property cap according to the staff report that you have in front of you based on his resubmitted after the deadline of 250,000. As we look with the current guidelines that have been adopted, there is some incomplete documentation, including the project schedule, the title report, and the confirmation of the secured matching funds. It's a requirement of the project. Due to these issues, staff cannot recommend that the agency award program funds for this application without the agency board guidance. And this is if you were to apply dollars for work that's already been completed. As you know, when we do a agreement, we have to go out and verify what has been completed prior to them starting, so that, you know, we're very clear. If you're asking for or willing to authorize payment for something that's already been completed, how do we verify the costs on that? How do we verify what was there prior to it? It gets really sticky from a staff perspective, but staff will do whatever the board mentions. Knowing that there's been so much conversation and knowing that it would be very difficult for you to just authorize an approval right now based on what was presented to the board. Um, the board recommendation is a conditional approval. The conditional approval would require that the application stays consistent with our now updated guidelines, as well as to provide support for only eligible expenses below the property-specific $300,000 cap, so $250,000 in this case. Eligible expenses that are listed in the guidelines has consistently limited those expenses to those incurred after the agency and after the applicant enters into the grant agreement. They have provided a information budget that shows $114,000 left to do. And so that was what we feel would be a good place to start with is that we would pay for the eligible expenses as part of that 114,000, as long as they can show that those monies are eligible, and that is, they have not been completed at this point. As well as we would also require a public benefit statement, a construction schedule, a title report, confirmation that there's full funding matching, and as well as a revised funding outline reflecting only future eligible work. Staff, both Joshua and I, would go out and do a site visit as soon as possible to see what is left to be completed, and then we would work through that budget to ensure that only those items that are left to be completed are eligible, and that's what we would fund. So while you would be authorizing up to 250,000 as per the grant guidelines, the way that the guidelines are written, it is the lesser of the $300,000 in the program. It is also the lesser of the eligible amount, and it is also the lesser of the future work to be done. So the 50% match. With that, we don't see it being 250,000. We see it being a portion of that 114,000 that they have left to do. The reason why I would usually not recommend this case as a conditional approval, because usually we want to have all that information up front. We request that there's 45 days to review the documents, and we can go through and we bring you exactly what's going to be done is the goal. The reason I would ask for the conditional approval is because they are currently working on it. Everything that they do today, they don't get reimbursement for, and we would do our due diligence on our side to protect the public asset and the public funds. That would be the staff recommendation. Other options are a full denial. That is within the board's realm of options, because the application that was presented is not fully complete in accordance with the new guidelines. This is another reason why I'm asking for the conditional approval is because how can they be within the guidelines if we just adopted the guidelines 2 minutes ago? So it's one of those sticky wickets. It is a very valid project. It's a very purposeful project, and we have people that are investing in downtown, and we want to support that however we can. But staff is, of course, in a situation like this with brand new staff, open to whatever the board may deem.
Tim or Steve, do you have additional thoughts you'd like to say right up front before I ask for questions or discussion from the board?
I wanted to thank Vic for a very thorough education on the position of the guidelines and where we are. I don't have any problem with what he said as far as verification and knowing what you're supporting and the work that has been underway. I just want to step back. Some of the things that Steve mentioned. Earlier. So we came in 23. We are anticipating getting going in 23. So end of 22, we had financing. We didn't owe any money on the building. We had been operating it for almost 20 years on our own. So we took a leap with Steve, trying to get this build out basically for the benefit of Freebridge. We had the space. So we knew we would have to borrow funds. So we got those funds lined up. We were ready to go in 23. And then we had presented our ask, and we put everything on it because we didn't really have any idea of what other, I mean, we put everything that was considered eligible at the time. However, we found out that a roof was not on it. We found out that sprinklers were not on it. We found a number of things that were surprises. In that time frame, we started in January with contact, and then we worked, and we got to this point in May of 23 that there was no way we could actually pull this off, even if we had everything we needed, because we'd be putting a fire suppression system in an operating business. And that was a big problem. And right at the beginning of their busiest time of year. So I remember asking Darcy and the board at the time, I said, can we come back next year? My second question is, will you have funds next year? And everyone said yes. So we went back to the drawing board. We had plenty of time to do that. We actually had some of our preparatory improvements going on, but we couldn't really do a lot without knowing that we could do the whole thing. So we revised the budget down from what we were asking. We got a definite reduction, reduction in the amount for the fire suppression system to like close to 140,000. We got that down to like 95 and change because the code compliance survey that we had the engineers do indicated that we did not have to fire suppress these areas that were already protected by firewalls and fire doors. So we just focused on what would be the main things that we needed to get Steve into these new digs, his new seating area. We want to expand that. The utilities in the kitchen, the grease trap, all the infrastructure that needed to support that operation, we needed that. So in 24, we brought this to Dan Spots was on board since the previous July. We started having conversations with Dan about that, and we were able to get a number to him in February that this is where we were going to work at. This is what our contribution would be, and this is what we're asking for. Only a month or so later into it, there was this kind of ominous issue, like, oh, we may not be able to fund it. We're having an audit, and there's something uncertain about that funding. Well, in order to get the fire suppression system done in 2024, we had to sign a contract in January, even to get them to commit to doing it in 2024. So we had one $95,000 contract we had to sign just to get them to do that work and put us on the schedule. So Dan was uncertain how long it would take to rectify the inaccessible funds. He said maybe a couple of months. So we had to go. I mean, it put us into basically an emergency situation. And that's what how I'll frame it. It was like we didn't hit the panic button, but we were close to it. And we just said, we have to keep this going. We are counting on these funds, and they'll work it out. You know, the ripple will be solved and we'll just be going. Well, by the time August ran around, we were out of money. We'd already gone back to the bank to ask and had more money, but we spent that by, and I can document the funds expended during the 2024. It's in my tax return, and I save receipts. So we knew that we were hanging it out there, but there was no way that if we didn't start in 2024, it would be a couple of years before we could get it together, and then just to build it out. So in December, Dan said, we're going to be in December. It's going to be decided a significant amendment to extend the maximum indebtedness. That was a milestone, but it took about 8 months to get there. In the meantime, we had volunteers, and I was one of them, working to keep the things going and laid out and try to keep the contractors on board to come back when we needed them, because jobs get stalled, contractors go where the work is. So we had that on top of the uncertainty of even getting the funding that we needed to complete it. So, I mean, that's the reality of the situation. We know what is eligible. We got a very good education, what is eligible. We have some items, and I'm really glad that the resolutions passed to it now help us pay for that system we paid for. I mean, to get that back would allow us to have cash to do the next things. The benefit that we got out of doing all of that, I mean, the benefit that is going to be realized is that there's like 6,000 additional square feet of usable space that's legally sprinklered. I downstairs in the cellar, which we were using for an occasional wine dinner when I had the winery there. There's almost 5,000 square feet down there, and Steve is going to be using only like 400 square feet of that. So the infrastructure is there. I have a bathroom down there. I have power panels down there. I have some lighting roughed in. There's power for equipment. There's a small kitchen that we built when we had the winery there. So that infrastructure is there. And without too much additional expense, we can make that an event site. Steve's had a couple of beer tastings down there and a couple other parties. Additionally, on the main floor, there's a portion. If you have the little map there, it shows in green the space that Free Bridge currently occupies, and then in pink, that is the kitchen, prep kitchen, main kitchen, receiving, and additional seating. That's almost 1,600 square feet that he's going to move into. Then you'll see the orange outline. The one on the right corner up on the right page is what we call the mezzanine. That now will have, if we can get that finished out, it'd be potentially used as an apartment, because it has a bathroom in it and has power and lighting to it. We haven't finished it yet. And then the cellar, obviously down the right-hand or left-hand corner, that outline in orange is that it's close to 4,000 square feet of space that would be available for an event site. So that's really a big additional bonus that we didn't really consider at the time when we were so focused on getting this facility built for him. So I guess my ask would be, we were more than willing to go through the evaluation. But you folks make the rules and the guidelines, and I understand that that is absolutely critical to run a program like this and run it, solidly. It is taxpayers' money going into that. I'm very supportive of that, and then wise investment. We have put the time in on this. We're asking really for one time only acceptance of the fact that we have done this, but we really didn't have a choice. And the outcome of making a different choice would be not having this for another year or two, if at all. So we're asking you to consider that. Our ask is only a few $1,000s more when you take out the 50 incentive. What we're asking around the 250 mark is only about $25,000 more than we were asking in 2023. So I just wanted to, make that a point. That is a big issue for us, and I think we would feel better about. We would feel a lot better of having that funding, and we're willing to do whatever examination. We have all the receipts. We have all the bills we paid. And it's the same project we've been talking about for 5 years, the same project we brought to you in 2023. It's not actually done. There are portions of it that is complete. We're waiting for the plumbing to hook up Steve's equipment, which he's ordered. He's moved in a cooler. He's moved in a pizza oven. But we don't have the final. So that job is not complete, even though we have paid for segments of it. So
Are there questions for Tim or Steve from the board?
Questions?
I'm curious, Jake or Josh, can you tell me, are there any other projects or conversations that are sort of midway that would be in the same situation with other people seeking sort of retroactive support? Or is this sort of is this a uniquely messy situation?
It is absolutely a uniquely messy situation. The board has agreed to other projects in the meantime that could potentially, if you open that door, come back and ask for other things. That was a concern. Staff has had conversations with legal counsel, and legal counsel is available if you have any questions for them for me coming, and granted, I'm still new to Oregon law, but in Washington, all the rules I've ever dealt with is there's no way you can ever pay for any back expenses, anything that's occurred prior to a grant agreement. And I know that's true for federal grant agreements. The only way that I've ever seen that it happens is on a federal grant. If you have an agreement in place that a project starts on this date, and then we will let you use your expenses as match from that point on. I've seen that happen. But again, that requires an agreement ahead of time.
I have a question for our city attorney. Jonathan, are you available, Mr. Kara?
Yeah, you bet.
Have you heard EDO Anderson's comments just now about this not being a situation that would be countenanced under Washington law? And if so, can you give us your sense of whether it would be allowed under Oregon law?
I can try. I mean, I am licensed to practice law in the state of Washington as well, although I'm certainly not a Washington practitioner. And so let me just stick to Oregon because I think that's probably the best bet. The reason that it would be inconsistent with law is we need sort of this we need a hook to sort of authorize the agency in the context of this program application. We need a hook to authorize us to make these sort of kinds of investments, and that hook has been very strategically the incentive program itself, which as everybody here knows, frankly, we as an agency have invested strong amount of time into to sort of lay out the framework under which the agency is willing to expend these public funds. And under that framework, it's mentioned like no less than 3 times. I would say probably closer to 5 times in the program guidelines and in the agreement that those guidelines contemplate that would ultimately be needed here under this application, that the agency will not be paying those funds or not paying those expenses that are incurred prior to the award of the grant. And there's a lot of sensible public policy reasons for that, but ultimately the agency board made that decision when those guidelines were approved, and every time we've entered one of those agreements since. But with that said, if the agency board would like to sort of explore the idea of paying for these expenses or really paying for any development costs, there's always the option of going outside of the incentive program, entering into a funding agreement beyond the confines of the program, which again, the only reason to really consider that in this situation would be to lawfully consider whether the agency should be committing funds that have already been attributed to expenses that have already happened. You could probably do that legally, but again, to sort of emphasize the point, I think that the agency board at the time when they adopted the guidelines, and every time we enter into one of these agreements, has sort of underscored that fact that we shouldn't be paying for those kinds of expenses because that is ripe for abuse. It's about as slippery a slope as I can imagine, and there's lots of ways for that system to be used against the agency, which is to say that there's lots of ways for that system to be used against the public and the public interest. And so I would caution against that in any event, just because it gives us a tremendous disadvantage when it comes to ensuring that those funds are being spent consistent with their purpose, which is a very narrow purpose. Is this helpful, or are you looking for something more specific?
That is helpful. Thank you. I guess my most specific, sort of the bottom line I was getting at is, are we in legal hazard or not if we were to consider making retroactive
Okay, yeah, I hear
payments?
And put it bluntly, the agency would be in legal hazard, it seems, if they were to provide those kinds of reimbursements under the incentive program. And so I understood tonight's action item to be an incentive program grant agreement application. And so in that context, it would not be appropriate for the agency to do that because the agency acts kind of like the city's charter. The agency has its plan, and that plan reflects these guidelines, which were incorporated into it. And so you'd be acting beyond really the scope of the agency's authority at this time to do that because it's in the plan effectively. But again, that's only because this is a really narrow question. And I'm sorry to be the lawyer in the room, but I have to kind of like lay the framework for this because I think that if the agency board wanted to do that, that is to say, to reimburse these expenses again, against these sort of public policy principles, the way to do it would be through a development agreement, not through the program. Hopefully that's clear.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor McLaughlin.
I'm just curious, we just passed a plan. What was in existence prior to the passage of that plan tonight? We were operating on a different set of rules and regulations?
No, so I'll let Josh or Jake jump in, but what was adopted earlier tonight were revisions to the agency's guidelines, and the guidelines are part of the plan, but we did not adopt a change to the plan tonight, just the guidelines. And to go a step further, nothing in tonight's revisions had anything to do with reimbursement of expenses as far as I can remember. But Jake's there too and can jump in, who I worked on with this. Again, this has sort of been a foundational principle for these guidelines. It has always been there. And I think it was there from the very first draft from a few years ago.
Yes, Mr. Schachtel.
I'm not really certain. It sounds like that non-reimbursement is a standard of the industry, but I'm not certain there is a law. Um, that's what I'm confused about. If the board has the authority with planning to develop the guidelines that they see fit, that will allow or disallow certain actions, how would that put us in jeopardy if there is validation for the and basically this would be a one time. If there's any kind of legal precedent, it would have to meet most of the conditions of if you granted this, so I mean that's a question. I'm not a lawyer, but I've been in the courtroom a lot. Um, so I think I would go along with what Jake said about validating everything that has been done. And this would be a one-off situation that I don't believe that people are going to come rushing in here with all these projects that they have already got underway because this decision was made in our favor. And just have a hard time seeing that. This was a one-off emergency situation. Had the funds been available, we would be done. We just saw it really no other way. Okay, if those funds show up, great, we'll go. And now, I mean, it went from a couple of months, well, a couple of more months, and then, I mean, it's like 9 or 10 months already, almost a year. But we would be foolish to stop the work. The financial burden on me and my partner is substantial. Just in that time period, we've paid over $65,000 in interest. Oh. Not asking for compensation for that. We put the numbers, the current numbers that we put in just in the last, through 24 and 25 is substantial.
Thoughts or questions from the board?
I'm not a procedural expert, but I would venture to guess, from what I understand, Mr. Kara to have mentioned that that what has been noticed on the agenda is incentive program grant request. And I think Mr. Anderson has presented us with some options under that request. Anything outside of that plan would need to be noticed on a different agenda. So not to say that I don't know that that couldn't be considered, but I hear Mr. Kara to say that if we wanted or were able to or comfortable with doing something different and outside of that grant request, that would need to come under a development funding agreement. So
Yeah, can I
that
just,
would-
just sort of
that would be not something that we would be able to do this evening. Correct? I mean,
yeah,
I guess what I'm saying is what we can deal with tonight is kind of what's in front of us, which is item 9C, which is the incentive program grant request. And unfortunately, that's kind of limited to the plan that we have that's been approved. And that your additional request doesn't fit, or I understand doesn't fit that. That doesn't necessarily mean that at some point, some additional discussion couldn't be had for the development funding agreement. And especially considering that we need, I would feel much more comfortable having that with a larger audience of my peers here. But that might,
So we,
that's my
So-
personal,
oh, I appreciate that very much. And I think that's a valid way to go. In fact, Dan was talking to us about a DFA, and the DFA was kind of this nebulous thing that, yeah, it's a long-term deal, but, and it had a significant time delay, like 6 months to get a DFA in place. And so, and I think Jake Anderson said the same thing about a DFA a week or so ago. It's like a DFA would take 6 months and have a full appraisal and all these other hoops to jump through. It didn't fit our need. That's why we were advised to just go with the
Counselor McLaughlin.
Let me understand this then. The passage of the conditional approval, as stated here, will that navigate us out of this mess?
So if you choose to entertain the, what Mr. Karras said, if you choose to entertain the idea of funding pre-agreement, so looking back, um, the conditional recommendation will not have an impact on that because we can only deal with what's in front of us today unless you, and that's why there's option 4 where you direct us to start working on a DFA. If you wanted, you could do the conditional approval today and we can help get them started and get an agreement in place so that we can cover the expenses that we can legally cover under the IP program. If you want, you can, and if you're interested in entertaining looking back, you can direct staff to negotiate and have those conversations about a DFA to do that. I believe what Mr. Karras said is that is within your rights. I haven't found anything in Oregon law that, you know, from my looking at it, that wouldn't allow you to do it. It's definitely not something that you see in best practices. It is, as he said, like ripe for abuse. I don't think that we're saying that they would abuse it. It's just, you know, it's just not done, you know, in good practice. This is a great way to start my new position with something that's really sticky.
Everything else will be easier.
And you should have saw how I was writing the staff report to begin with to throw it all on your shoulders and not make a recommendation because it's not a fun place to be, you know, right off the bat. But again, my recommendation, and I'm to try to help these guys as much as we can, is to give us the leeway so that we can move forward with getting an agreement in place. And so the stuff that they still have to do, that we can get them reimbursed for those eligible expenses as soon as possible.
So that's adoption of number 1, the conditional approval plus adding number 4 step,
Uh,
which would number 4 give you direction to go out.
I don't think you would need to make a motion on that. You could just direct staff to go do that and work with the city attorney if that's what you're willing to entertain.
And that when you say what we're willing to entertain, that is the question of whether we can find a way to reimburse expenses prior to any sort of agreement. They're retroactive. Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
the DFA.
that's
my
policy. That's above my pay grade these days.
Ben or Scott,
Yeah.
any questions or comments that you'd care to make at this point?
Okay. Well,
Is
let me call it up here.
is the question clear to the board where we are?
Yep.
All right. Is there anyone interested in making a motion at this point?
Before we do that, can I,
Sure.
Yes.
apologize, I do have a question. From the option 1 that's listed in the packet, for conditional approval, is there anything, you know, it talks about a public benefit statement, construction schedule, title report, confirmation of full match funding, revised online or outline reflecting only future eligible work, and then itemized bids for the work that has not been completed. That doesn't read, there's nothing in there that I read that suggests that we would be entertaining any past expenses.
It is clearly for only future expenses, and that's why the way it's written is an amount not to exceed $250,000.
Yep.
But in reality, with what they have left to do, you can't get there. So when we look at the program and it's the lesser of the 50%, the 250,000, we're saying you could, but we know you can't. But because we don't have that perfect number,
Sure.
because they need to go out and get those numbers and those bids, it just allows us to do it.
And is there anything in that list that you think would not be,
Doable.
yeah, would you be able to complete that in a reasonable amount of time? Or are we looking at like,
I actually drew this up a month ago.
okay,
Got quotes from people. Like I said, we have limited funds and we kept it going. We didn't stop. Even this, there's things that are underway right now.
is staff confident that there can be a clear delineation between what was already completed and what would be covered under something like this going forward, if approved?
Messy, right?
Yeah.
Which is exactly why Josh and I would have to go out and do a survey, and we would have to go down through the list and say what's been not started, what's been completed, what's in process. If it's in process, we have to get a new bid for the work to be done, and then that was what would then be going towards it. As it's written, we couldn't pay for stuff that's halfway completed, and so it's going to be time consuming, but I want to help these guys as much as possible. And this is the cleanest way we could see with getting through this. And honestly, if you want to throw out the public benefits statement or anything like that, that's totally fine, because we just passed it right now. But honestly, I don't see it being very difficult.
Okay. I'm waiting. Anyone? I think it's the best course of action that I can see. I'm prepared.
Are you ready to make a motion?
Yeah.
Feel free.
All right.
Please do.
I'll move to conditionally approve the application and authorize the agency manager to execute an incentive program grant agreement with the Dalles Mint LLC consistent with option 1 and in an amount not to exceed $250,000 as presented.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that has been seconded. Is there additional conversation, I should say discussion, or questions?
No, but I appreciate the effort and that you made about sending the message that, the city is looking for being a partner with growth and development. And that's important to send that message out so we continue to expand, right? Thank you very much.
Anyone else? For my part, Tim, I'm tied in knots. I want very much to support your efforts and support your work in a real way and not just in a sort of, go get them moral sense. But I just find it tough to try and navigate through and say we are going to pay for something that's been done prior to our agreement. And I understand that didn't work for you, but I'm not hearing a lot of other support for retroactive payments either. So the motion that has been made and seconded would not do that. It would be working with us going forward on whatever expenses are made after the vote. and after the paperwork's final.
Let me finish this up. I understand that
Yeah.
this is one portion of the equation, and the other portion of it is to direct you to go forth and look for the method in order to compensate for perhaps funding for the work that's been done. Is that true? There's like two.
Those are two separate points and not in the current motion.
One is a motion, and then that after the motion is passed, then you're asking for direction from the council or from the board to let you move forward and find options. Correct?
I'm not making that recommendation on the after. I think that is a matter of policy that I think needs to be discussed amongst the board. And then once the board decides on your policy, if you're willing to open that Pandora's box, then you direct staff to work with the city attorney on trying to find a way through it.
So I stand corrected. There are 2 points. I apologize.
Now, the policy update that we just passed, was that included in?
In the policy, or in the guideline update that was just passed, it clearly states that we will not pay for anything that has been completed, and that is consistent with the prior policy and, as Mr. Karras said, the policies since the beginning of the program.
So we're kind of jumping ahead, but the motion as is going forward.
Yes,
Is there
that stands.
there further questions or discussion on that motion?
No, I would just so people understand, there's quite a write-up of what option 1 is in the
Yeah.
packet. So it's pretty extensive and it's very clear about what that means.
Oh, I'm not in charge. You are. We have someone. Tim would like to.
Oh, yes, please.
So I'm not really clear if option 1 will get us there.
The motion is strictly for going forward upon some conditions of various bits of paperwork, a title report, construction schedule, etc. The question of addressing potential retroactive compensation or payments has, I think, not been settled. That's not in this motion.
And if I may, the applicant has not had a chance to see the staff recommendation. Well, I guess if they've reviewed the document, I did not send the staff recommendation to them. What we were trying to do here is, again, for incentive program applications, the goal is to have those into us 40 days before the board meeting so that we can go back and forth with them, and then I can make sure that they have all the documents that are listed in there. We're not asking for anything that usually wouldn't always be listed. What we're trying to do is make a bit of an exception here, and that's the conditional, so that we can get to the agreement quicker, so that we don't have to wait to have another meeting with you, and then we start that process.
Understood. Thank you.
So one last thing.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm still confused. Jonathan has indicated, but not cited, is there a actual law that prohibits the board from doing this, or is it just a policy?
I'm going to say let's hold that until we vote on this motion,
Okay.
which is just a bit narrower.
Got it. Thank you. All right.
Are there any more on this motion? Seeing none, I would like to take a vote, please. Let's have all in favor of the motion on the floor to say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. I vote aye. Board chair votes aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Is there any other further discussion on this matter or any further staff direction? Staff's looking for clarity. I think it's fair to say they want to know if they should be considering this or other scenarios that involve work that's already been done and paid for or not? And if so, we need to tell them to do that. And if not, we owe them clarity on that point.
What was the acronym that you referred to, the
DFA,
EFA?
direct funding.
It's a development funding agreement.
Oh, no, okay.
And we have entered into development funding agreements with Basalt Commons. And we also entered into a development funding agreement with what was going to be in the Tony's building, didn't we?
Oh, no, it's in the blue building.
Oh, the blue building.
So the precedent has been set.
We have created development funding agreements in the past. One thing that also comes to mind that should always been concern the board that I'm not sure how that would play out is the question is, number one, can you legally do it? Number two, should you legally do it? And number three, are you creating audit risk if you do it? And that's one other issue that I'd be concerned about with thankfully, with what you did, we're keeping it separate from the IP program, which is good, because if you were to authorize something outside of the usual bounds of the guidelines of the IP program, that to me would be a big audit red flag. Doing it through a development funding agreement, that is the question for legal counsel in Oregon on what liability the board is willing to take on. And what your policy might want to have.
Right.
So the DFA, if as I understand it, please correct me, is less wieldy than the incentive program. It's for larger projects, and therefore it's a bit more involved and takes longer to put together. It's a separate tool. It's
Understood.
okay.
Yeah.
Our attorney and our staff have said if we want to explore the idea of making retroactive incentive or funding, that's really the only way that makes sense to even explore it.
So when that DFA is agreed upon, does that come back to the board for approval? Okay, then I'm okay with that. So
I guess my question stands: is this a one-off, or do we find? I know it is for, for Tim, for Mr. Schechtel, a one-time request. Do you feel like it opens, as you said, a Pandora's box to have other people come in and say, we've done this project, you guys didn't cover it at the time, or we didn't do the paperwork or whatever, we needed to move forward, and we're in the downtown and you guys should
I am always concerned with creating precedent.
Yeah.
It is a slippery slope, as Mr. Karras said. I want to be able to thread the needle because we have next on the agenda somebody else that's coming forward under the new programs. And if these guys had came forward or the money was there 2 years ago, I believe when they were starting to enter into the negotiations, there wasn't 300,000 available, right? Your numbers were less and they were looking for more than that. And so it was going to have to go through a DFA at that time anyways. And it kind of fell apart because we realized we didn't know if we had the money we thought we had for the program in the first place. Lo and behold, we do have funds. And these guys got stuck in bad timing in a bad place. And they put themselves out on the line. And I feel terrible for that. It's never a fun place to be. I thank the board for sort of threading the needle and for what we've done so far. The policy discussion, that's up for the board. I'm willing to do whatever you guys want us to do and work with the attorney. It's a tough policy decision.
the pleasure of the board.
I for one would love to have the information. I think it would be good to, if there is like an Oregon statute that prohibits something like that, we need to research it and
agreed.
sort that out. So, and then from there, I'm very, just personally, I'm very skeptical of retroactive payments for things that have already, uh, you know, been used or whatnot. I I definitely, coming from my day job, working with the federal government a lot, that's definitely at the federal level has disaster written all over it. But I think it's a good question to ask under state law.
I think it's, as I said earlier, I think it's a larger question, maybe for more for folks that are
Yeah.
missing this evening, and I'd like to see what everybody else feels, but I don't think it's a bad idea to go down a little farther down the road and do a little investigating, and so I wouldn't be opposed to, I wouldn't say no, don't do anything, I guess.
Gentlemen, do you have thoughts on how to, whether or how to direct staff? Do you feel support for the idea of exploring at least the legality of the question of retroactive payments? Trying to get clarity on that? Is that something you'd like to?
Jonathan.
City Attorney Kara.
Oh, hey, thank you. I don't know. I just wanted to weigh in just in case it informs any decisions in response to some questions earlier about whether there was a statute that may have at least prohibited the agency's ability to finance any funds inconsistent with the guidelines. There is a statute for that. We didn't include it in the staff report, but just for the record, yeah, there's a statute called ORS 457.170, subsection 6. And 0.170 is the statute that plainly authorizes the urban renewal agency's powers generally in undertaking projects. And it's a statute that has 10 specific powers that urban renewal agencies have. And power number 6 authorizes the agency to carry out plans for a program of the voluntary repair and rehabilitation of buildings or other improvements in an urban renewal area in accordance with the urban renewal plan. And that statute effectively says, for purposes of this agency, that the agency can absolutely have an incentive grant program, because that is a program that incentivizes the voluntary repair and rehabilitation of buildings in our urban renewal area. But the agency's ability to do that program must be consistent with the plan, which is why the agency updated its plan last year, I think, actually 2 years ago for this particular update, to include the guidelines, because that's the program. And so the agency has a ton of discretion. If the agency wants to update its guidelines to allow those kinds of expenses, for example, but really for anything, it can absolutely do that because those guidelines are incorporated into the plan, and it can go ahead and pay those expenses through this program. But again, just to go beyond that, and again, probably part of the reason why it seems like the former and current economic development officers quoted a 6-month turnaround for development agreements is because they're complicated. And whether the agency can do that is a question that I haven't fully addressed yet. It's a tough question, and I promise to look into it if that's the consensus of the board. But these are far and few between. Basalt Commons, the Blue Building, and the City of the Dalles are all parties that the agency board has entered into development funding agreements with. The development funding agreement for the City of the Dalles, I believe, was the parking lot development over on 3rd Street. With all that said, if the board wants staff to look into this, we absolutely will. It may result in me not finding any statute that prohibits this type of reimbursement for previous expenditures. But if I do, then we'll let you know that too, and then we can go from there. But I guess I'm just saying that it's basically up to whatever you all want to do, and we can come back and provide you with an update, at the as early as the next meeting or the meeting after. So hopefully this was helpful and informs the rest of the discussion here.
Well, in honesty, I'm extremely skeptical myself. I think we're same words I think Councilor Ring just used of making retroactive payments. I think staff has given us good guidance that puts us in that thin ice really fast. But however, I'm not the board. I'm only one member, and it sounds like other folks would like to have clarity on that. So let's get at least a showing of hands or a nodding of heads. Shall we ask staff to research and find legal clarity to the best of their ability on whether we can even do this, entertain retroactive payments?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm
with
not a
it.
vote. It's just a head nod, just a yes or no.
I'm fine. I just want to say that I don't think we want to do this ever, like in the future, right? This is kind of a situation here, but I mean, I don't think we want to do it from the standpoint of putting it in the plan and doing it. But maybe, yeah, I'm okay asking the question, but it's not something I'm very excited about doing to be certain. Yeah. It's a challenge in all, like you've said, in all grant programs. They don't do it. You can't refinance debt. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that grants don't do, and this is one of them.
Yeah. And I take your point. I would like a fuller board to be here to express, a range of thoughts, but it sounds like yes to direction of staff. Please find out and answer if this is even something we could entertain. Thank you very much on that. Yes.
Hi, I'm Erin Vance. I'm Tim's wife
Hi
and
there.
also partner. And I just have a question about, it's not mutually exclusive that you could only get urban renewal incentive grant or a DFA, right? Related.
Oh, we passed the ability for the board to move forward, or staff to move forward to enter into the agreement under the incentive program. A DFA is not mutually exclusive. You could have the incentive program and a DFA. And then the board would have a lot of really difficult decisions because DFAs are completely open. We haven't built any guidelines. We don't have any sideboards. We have no policies. They could come in and say, hey, we want $1 million on top of the 300 that you just authorized.
Yeah.
They could ask for anything. I've never seen a program like it. Coming from Washington, we don't have any of these types of opportunities that Oregon has. We don't have, enterprise zones. We do have opportunity zones, but we don't have, the tax increment financing and it's fun to work in because it's so open. And really it comes down to the policies that you all want to set and the guidelines that you want to set on what you're willing to do with dollars.
I would say
It's amazing.
Jake, well, I'm glad to hear that we have some liberties there, but I guess I would caution you just for maximum clarity. The direction staff was find out whether this particular scenario is something we could even advance.
Right.
And here's a larger board, or if it's kind of a moot point.
Right.
So I would not spend too much time starting a DFA before you get that answer.
My goal would be to come back to you in 1 month with research and report and a staff report, not to enter into negotiations on a DFA until it is directed by the board.
Good.
Reasonable.
That helps. And also, just a small point. In this case, where it is messy and it's been going on for years, could the board or decide to look at the previous application as a point of this is where we were 2 years ago. When we made our initial application.
Yeah.
So at that point, there was nothing that had started. And because of all the, back and forth and changing of the, situation, I just want to say that that might make it less of a slippery slope because other businesses would not be able to do that because they would be coming with their first application at this point. So just to think about.
Question for,
Please.
question for staff. So, they mentioned that they put an application in 2 years ago. I would be curious to know what the status of that original application was. My understanding is that the application that we had is not the same that it kicked off with. Is that correct? My understanding maybe is off.
Yeah, so at the May 16th, 2023 meeting, I just pulled this up. Yeah, staff's recommendation was moved to approve funding not to exceed $65,000. And this would have been through a separate funding agreement. And then that was also to encourage the applicant to apply for a $50,000 incentive program. So at the end of the day, it would have been that, 115,000. And it was, I think, requested at that time that they turned down the offer the night of that meeting. So that is what was in front of us at that time. And now we're in the situation we're at today.
Yeah, I take the point that the conversation, if you will, had been entered in. This is not sort of the start of a conversation. It's a long ways into one. So I do, for myself, I take your point. Thank you for that. Are we concluded with this for tonight? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We're moving on to item 9D. Action. The historic post office upper floor renovation.
Chair, board, I hope this is how applications go from here on out. We now have a clean slate. We have a new program guideline document, and we have a great application that's come in that was, I had a lot of discussions with Ms. Cordry, and she was able to submit the documents using the old grant application because I haven't made it go live, and they are in another position where they are looking to start construction in June, and they would love to not have to push it off 2 months. We figure that it takes about a month at least to come up with your grant agreement, and so. What you have before you is a application and all the supporting documentation from CREZ Partners seeking up to $97,275 in program funds to assist in the redevelopment of the second floor of the historic post office. You will note that this is a total project cost of $270,850. So the applicants are committing $173,000. So this is a prime example of the lesser than on the three different criteria. It is A, under $300,000. It is B, under 50% match. It actually comes in they're going to provide 64% of the funding. But because of that, they're only eligible for 97,000 that we've been able to ascertain at this point on the eligibility. When we go through and come to final agreement, we will do a walkthrough. We will make sure that that 97,000 and all of it is eligible. What you have before you is staff recommendation to authorize the agency manager to execute an incentive program grant agreement with CRES Partners in the amount to not exceed $97,275, consistent with the new program guidelines and the submitted application. There is a lot of pictures. This is a supplemental, also something that I don't believe the board gets very often. But we were getting down to the line on getting it out, and this is another instance where they really want to move forward. And from what we've seen, it's a really, really positive application that enhances and fulfills all the needs and goals of the program.
Board questions or comments?
I'm here.
I'm sorry?
Nothing over here.
Nothing over there. Tell me about the library, Jake, if you would. It says family library.
So,
I'm just being curious.
as I understand it, there is a long history with the owners, and oh, there you are. Come.
She's been sitting there patiently all evening. Gotta let her speak.
Not library, it's a portrait.
Good evening.
So, Zukin family has a long and deep history that brought them here to the Dalles. And I was first tasked with documenting that history on a museum wall in the facility, in the Meadow Outdoor Facility. It became very quickly apparent that that was not going to be an adequate venue for telling a very wonderful story of immigration from Russia in 1943. Young Jewish tailor escaping persecution, and how he went to California, created a garment company, became a millionaire. His son then took that money to the park, San Jose. His son ended up here in the Dalles. This is all very related, sparing you the details, but that is a story that we want to tell a portion of. Will be not a library, but privately held museum.
Ah, thank you. Questions or thoughts from the board?
Just gonna say, it's really nice when the application flows nicely and there's pictures and there's comments, and the pictures are amazing. And super helpful, and the floor plan was helpful, so I could visualize exactly what your plans were, and the timeline and the budget. I I had no questions because it was very thorough.
if I may, Chair.
Please.
I would agree with everything Ms. Coburn said, to the point that as I'm working on the updates to the application, based on the application that she submitted, I've made changes to the application material so that it's going to be easier and clearer for the board to understand the difference between the total costs and the eligible costs, so that it is very clear for you in the future. And she did do a wonderful job with this application. Really sets the new standard.
Any further discussion?
So just quickly, so basically the project is to rehab the second story of the old post office. And then the use is basically part of it. 3 rooms are for the museum, and then the other rooms are just available for like rentals. Is that right?
Yes, so we're hoping to attract maybe an attorney or a real estate agent, somebody who is symbiotic with the
Title company. Okay. Is that like, what is the upstairs now? I mean, what happens in the upstairs? Is it?
nothing. It's been disused since probably the late 80s.
Yeah.
And there was some pictures show there's some damage to the walls and ceilings from fog roof drains, basically. And so it's just been disused. They haven't done anything up there. They abandoned space.
Okay.
Storage mostly.
They had a few things up there, but really basement's being used more for storage than it's just really abandoned.
Is it ADA accessible to the second floor? What are the plans? Are there any?
Elevator would probably make the most sense, but that is really costly.
Yeah, I know.
But we, as far as museum space, we plan to create a kiosk for the floor.
Okay.
It's ADA accessible. Other tenants, I don't know, have to come up with what was important. I imagine that we might be able to work something out with the title company. We do have a small conference. And that would just be something we'd have to explore.
Staff, forgive me, I should know this, but is there anything in our guidelines or plan that requires upper story improvements to be ADA accessible? I mean, are we authorized to make this in absence of ADA upgrades?
I think it would be more, ADA would be more of a building codes question. Yeah, nothing in our guidelines that would require it, the urban renewal guidelines. I do think there's also like some work being done to the American Legion building. They're going to be putting some offices upstairs there as well. They're just going to have stair access. So I do think that, I think there's a cutoff. It's a building codes cutoff for when that elevator triggers. So I think in this case, it would be, I think probably fine.
Does anyone have in mind to make a motion?
Councilor Richardson,
Yes.
just want to jump in. I guess I understood the focus of your question just now to be more on whether, I just want to make sure that you have it answered. If was your question more about whether the guidelines would approve these costs if they weren't required under ADA?
No, my question was, and again, I preface with I probably should know this already, and I just don't off the top of my head. My question was, is there anything in urban renewal, in our urban renewal agency guidelines that would prohibit us from making an incentive program, passing an incentive program request that did not have, for a project that did not have ADA
Yeah.
access? Are we okay to do this in the absence of an ADA accessible upper floor?
Yeah. Okay. I think that actually was the exact question I asked you, just in the inverse. But the answer to your question, I think, is yes. The program guidelines allow us to cover eligible projects, and eligible expenses include safety and accessibility improvements. Excuse me. And for an example of what a safety and accessibility improvement is, we list, ADA access improvements. However, the guidelines allow all safety and accessibility improvements, regardless of whether they are also required under the ADA. Hopefully that's helpful.
What's the pleasure of the board?
In our guidelines for our minimum eligible requirements, it does not say anything about requiring ADA accessibility to the second floor. It talks about whether or not they're have other tax abatements or whether they're in arrears on their city accounts. There's nothing that states that you have to have it upgraded. I think the bigger issue that you came across, like for example, when we were talking about a DFA with the Mint building was in order for them to make the improvements when they go through the building permit process, that's when it kicks it in. And it's in Josh's environment. It's not in our environment and
Right.
in our program. It's you want to do it, go do it. And then you have to have the permits in order to do the work.
Right. Right.
Go. Let me go.
Well, shall we? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Please, Councilor Ray.
I'll move to approve the application and authorize the agency manager to execute an incentive program grant agreement with CREZ Partners LLC in the amount not to exceed $97,275, consistent with the program guidelines and submitted application.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion that is active and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions?
So no discussion, but just for disclosure. So my wife works for Meadow Outdoor Advertising, which is not CREZ Partners, but just so there's people know, I know Chris. I think everybody knows Chris, but my wife
Yes,
works for one of his companies, and I don't think that. I mean, the attorney can correct me, but I don't think there's any conflict there.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your disclosure. Anything
In
else?
case, Councilor Richardson, can I just weigh in?
Yes, please do.
In case board member Aggie is depending on or expecting legal advice from me on that, I just want to remind all of you as the appointed or elected officials to the agency board, you're all public officials, you're all subject to the government ethics law. This is a good opportunity just as a friendly reminder that those liabilities are your own. The city attorney, and again, I'm not trying to be a lawyer, but I have to be sometimes. But I can't give you legal advice personally because those liabilities are personal to each and every one of you in your capacity as officials. With that said, the agency I think has a strong interest in supporting its public officials to make sure that they're not, unintentionally running into ethical issues. I think that the standard that's applicable to what I just learned, I think what maybe others in the audience maybe just learned. I didn't know that before this. And I frankly, I don't have enough details in front of me to really give you a super informed opinion, but the rule generally is if a public official is met with an actual conflict of interest, they must recuse themselves. And it must be brought up, sort of at the commencement generally of the conversation, declare the conflict and the nature of the conflict, and then recuse themselves from the discussions. Some best principles there are also involving like leaving the dais. But if a public official is met with a potential conflict of interest, then the expectation under the ethics laws are for them to simply just disclose the nature or the existence of and the nature of that conflict. Something like, hey, I think I have a conflict and this is why, and this is, when I say this is why, I guess I mean like these are the facts that support this conflict of interest. And public officials met with a conflict generally when themselves or their family members or somebody in their household would derive some sort of pecuniary benefit, so a financial gain, them or a business they're associated with. And whether something is a business that they're associated with is there's some ethical opinions on that. It's a question of fact generally, but again, and also finally, the difference between an actual conflict of interest and a potential conflict of interest is literally the letter C or W in front of could or would. Would that involvement implicate a conflict of interest versus could that involvement in the process implicate a conflict of interest. And so all of that is to say that this is not legal advice for any one of you, but just generally, these are some refresher points for conflicts of interest. Thank you.
Thank you for the refresher. In the absence of further discussion, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye, both.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing
I'm opposed,
none.
but I will abstain just for, as I mentioned.
Thank you. So we have a 4 to A vote. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you for your clear and neat application. Item 10, board member comments or questions.
I just would apologize for being so late. We have a commission meeting tomorrow and I had meetings with staff and unfortunately I got here as soon as I could.
Glad you got here.
Glad you got here in time for an important discussion so we could hold an important couple of votes. Staff comments or project updates, if any.
Yeah, I can provide a quick update. He introduced himself, but I just want to thank Jake Anderson for coming aboard and jumping in with us here. Really appreciate it. He's been, made an immediate impact from just his short time being with the city. So appreciate it. Jake, thank you so much. Just wanted to provide an update. Our First Street project, I know it's been requested that we have an update to the board, probably targeting an update to the board like in July. At this point, we are working with Walker Macy, which is the same design firm that did the Federal Street Plaza. So we're getting some renderings done of First Street. So it's easier to understand what's really going on out there. I've seen some kind of rough ideas with it right now. So I think it's going to be easier to have that messaging to the public when we can actually see something that looks like, just instead of just a bunch of lines on a paper, like an engineered plan. So shooting for July for that meeting. We are in the process. The archaeological work has been shipped out to the state, so it is under SHPO review right now. We're targeting a visit with SHPO. We're hoping that will occur. There's a process that will go into place with this First Street project. It's a mitigation plan. We know it's going to have an adverse impact on the historical character of First Street. So there's a mitigation plan that has to be adopted by SHPO. So we're hoping to get ahead of that and have them out there in June to go over what we've already outlined as some mitigation tactics. So I'm trying to outline that now before we get further on down the road with it. And then also just an update, some construction, those First Street parking lots, they are finally going to be repaved come the first week of June as well. So we'll have a visit from SHPO. At the same time, our road crews are going to be working on redoing those parking lots. At the same time, we'll have an archaeologist on site to monitor the work because that is also an archaeological site. So we have a permit in with SHPO right now to do all that. So we're moving forward. Slower than we had hoped, but we're definitely moving forward on it. And we'll be sending out noticing. We're going to do probably a 300-foot notice to the any business owner, any property owner that's in about 300 feet of those parking lots, just to let everybody know that these lots are going to be closed for the first week of June. We're also going to do our road crews are going to be walking door to door to some of the businesses down 2nd Street to make sure that messaging is out there as well. So yeah, that's all I have. Anything from you, Jake?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Sure. Speaking of the parking lots, kind of what's the status of the new parking lot, like kitty corner from, and I asked because I think that's an urban renewal project, is it not?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a partnership with the city. We had been actually holding off on that and developing it because it could potentially be used as a laydown yard of sorts for the Basalt Commons project. So before going through the process of digging up the parking lot, we want to make sure that, that they don't tear it up during construction in the event they need to use that.
Okay, that's good to know. People ask me and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Josh, is there a time, like, how long how long's too long? Do you wait?
Yeah, it's, I think,
Sorry.
no, yeah, that's probably a question I need to.
Like you said, I mean, it's a long question people are asking.
Yeah, it is. And I understand. Probably something I need to nail down with the city manager a bit more on. I don't know if he's been keeping tabs on that project, maybe I'll do I'll ease out of this because it's a city project. The agency's just paying for it. But not the best answer for you. My apologies. But that was kind of our reasoning behind it, as I know the Basalt
Okay.
Commons project's been taking a little bit longer than we had hoped. So we just want to make sure that we don't invest the money into that lot, and in the event that it's used, that it's going to be tore up and have to be, fixed. So
Understood.
Is there any chance of an update or action, or I should say traction, from that larger next door project that we might hear in June or July by chance?
the next, the Bethel Commons.
Yeah.
So right now building permits are being reviewed by our team. I think they're actually being reviewed by Wasco County. Is taking a look at them as well right now. Just trying to get ahead of that a little bit because typically building permits don't go to Wasco County until they're signed off by the city. We're kind of doing a joint review right now. I am unclear about the funding aspect of that project right now. I do know that I spoke to the developer and she was intending on providing us with an update at this upcoming June meeting. So she'd mentioned that to me. I spoke with her. She didn't have the most information at this to come up for this May meeting. So I said, well, let's just push it off until June. So she was going to provide an update. Whether she's going to be here to provide that or just provide it in writing, I'll definitely bring that to the board.
I think either would be well received and appreciated.
Bet.
Anything else from you guys?
It's been a pleasure. 5 weeks has went by very fast. 4 full weeks, starting into the 5th week. And for those that I've not had a chance to get to know and meet, I would love to get on your calendar in the next month to get to know you a little better. And so expect to see an email from me and trying to set some time aside so that I can hear from you guys and try to understand your backgrounds and where you're coming from so that I can better serve you.
Very good. Anything else for the good of the order? Meeting adjourned.
Nice work. Betty.